What is going on, everybody? Travis Fowler Harkrider is back with another edition of Tights and Turnbuckles this week, which means you know what time it is. It's time to talk pro wrestling because, man, there was a lot of things that happened this past week in the build-up to last night's Bad Blood PLE, and it has implications going forward for tomorrow night's Monday Night Raw, as well as some implications going forward with some of the events we've got upcoming. So let's not wait any longer. Let's dive right into it because there's a ton to review in-ring wise as well as some backstage stuff to talk about. So let's start with Monday Night Raw. It was all built around the last Monster Standing match between Braun Strowman and Bronson Reed, and I gotta tell you, it was a pretty good match overall. They had a lot of really fun spots for two big yet agile men. I mean, Strowman coming off the top rope was pretty amazing to witness. Some of the spots you could kind of see coming, like a table spot, was sure to have happened. You would also see the barricade get broke, which I expected that to happen as well. And honestly, some may have not have seen it coming, but I figured that there could be a possibility we would see this spot revisited again, and we certainly did. We saw the ring imploding spot from a suplex, Bronson Reed suplexing Strowman, and the ring collapsing. It's the fourth time that we've seen WWE pull this spot off. The very first time was in 2003 on an edition of SmackDown with Brock Lesnar and The Big Show. Then we saw Big Show and Mark Henry do it at Vengeance 2011, and we saw Strowman and Big Show do the exact same spot. I believe that was in 2018, maybe 19, and then this past Monday as well, which it looked as if Bronson Reed was going to be the one to pick up the win. However, we saw the return of Seth Rollins stomping away that victory from Reed and allowing Strowman to reach his feet by the count of 10, making him the last monster standing. And I gotta say, I think we are on the track. The Strowman Express is rolling once again to see the build back up of Braun Strowman. I know a lot of people really missed that dominant Strowman that we saw from 2018 to 2019, where he was just going on a tear and ripping through the entire roster. And some feel like he lost his momentum with the Money in the Bank situation, and I honestly have to agree with that statement because you had Strowman built up so well when honestly, and myself included in this, a lot of people didn't really think much was going to come from Strowman. And then he turned out to be one of the funnest acts on WWE TV for quite some time. Bronson Reed, he had a little bit of his own setbacks as well. We saw in his career earlier in WWE during his first run, unfortunately, the carpet getting pulled out from underneath him and released, although he showcased great agility, great matches during his NXT run. Then he went back to the indie scene as well as making a name for himself as Jonah in TNA, as well as going and doing a small stint in New Japan. Then he came back to WWE, and while he's had a couple personal setbacks through no fault of his own, just bad timing, it now looks like they are going to go all in with Reed and make him a dominant force, which I think is well overdue. He is a great competitor, he's got a great gimmick, and he embodies the aura of a big guy in this day and age that can move and put on great matches. And he's going against a guy that he was set to face earlier this year in his home country of Australia, where he and Seth Rollins were supposed to fight over the World Heavyweight Championship. Again, some setbacks through no fault of his own caused that to not take place. But now I think it can be even more exciting because without the world title, you've got the returning Seth Rollins going up against a new up-and-comer in Bronson Reed. It makes things so much more less predictable, and I think these two can have a hell of a feud, and I think we're watching the precipice of that take place starting tonight on Monday Night Raw as this drops. And let's talk about another thing that was made official because tonight on Raw, we get two championship matchups. First, the Intercontinental title match with Jey Uso taking on Xavier Woods. Kofi Kingston gifting him hit that IC title shot last week. There might be some problems, though, still brewing in the New Day, but Xavier Woods gets his opportunity to get his first singles championship in WWE, and he's going to battle a white-hot main event Jey Uso. Should be a fun matchup there, but we also had the confirmation of the main event for tonight's Monday Night Raw. We saw Sami Zayn finally goat Gunter into giving him the World Championship match he's been looking for, and that will be your main event tonight. Sami Zayn taking on Gunter, and this time the World Heavyweight title is on the line. Will lightning strike twice with Zayn like it did at Mania? We'll just have to wait and see tonight's matchup to find out. Now, let's talk a little bit about AEW and their 5th anniversary of Dynamite. Obviously, it comes off the heels of some excellent news for AEW, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But I think you could make the argument, even though there was quite a bit that went on for AEW, there's two main points there, and it's the opener and the main event for the show. Will Ospreay and Ricochet, had a little lump in my throat there. They pulled out what you would expect from the two of them. I know some people didn't think this matchup lived up to the hype, and I'll be honest, maybe it didn't, but I'm not mad about that because this is going to be the first in what you can expect to be a few more meetings between these two. I mean, they talked about their rivalry dating back all the way to the indie days in 2013, I believe is when they first met. So you know the history with New Japan in the Super Juniors tournament, the match that broke the internet and divided opinions on what wrestling is currently or what it should be. Whatever your stance is on that, it got both men noticed, and we got to see a rematch of that this past Wednesday. Overall, I didn't have much of an issue with the match. I, like a few others, was a little iffy about the draw finish, but that has led to the three-way international title match to take place at Wrestle Dream, adding Inosuke Takeshita into that match. It should be a fun one to see, but I don't think we're finished with Ospreay and Ricochet on their own. So while some may chastise the match, overall I think it was a great way to do what we are looking at it doing, which was building for the three-way as well as the eventual return match where hopefully we will have a definitive winner between Ospreay and Ricochet. Then the main event was Kazuchika Okada, the Continental Champion, taking on Bryan Danielson, the AEW World Champion. There was an interesting stipulation in that with the first 20 minutes saying the Continental title was going to be on the line. So they already informed you that this match was going to go pretty long. And they had a 30-minute run over time. Of course, this was in celebration for the great news that we heard about earlier in the day. And I have to admit, I actually have preferred some of the earlier matches between Okada and Danielson. Not to say that this match was terrible. It was what it was, but I do have to agree with one thing that I saw online and felt like it was maybe a little too slow and drug out more than what it should. I understand why they put it on last. I also understand why they did a longer match with the Continental title only being on the line for 20 minutes of that match. It is an interesting stipulation. I don't know if I would want to see that again in the future. But, it was a unique premise. It was a first time for me to see. I don't think in my 30 years of watching wrestling that I've ever seen something like that presented. So it was something new, and props to both guys for pulling out a good match to cap off the 5th anniversary of Dynamite. Moving on into NXT, which happened the night before. They debuted on the CW to a very successful debut. The Julia Roxanne Perez match did deliver, and I have to admit I was surprised that Julia didn't walk out with the win. Instead, we saw the return of Cora Jade, costing her that NXT Women's Championship, which, by the way, before we go any further, the new titles we saw debut this past week, and then we saw another one last night on the PLE, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But the NXT Women's and Men's Championships, I actually admit, I have to say that the new design is pretty cool. It's still the same basic aura that you had with the previous inception of the NXT title, but There is more silver to the gold. I like that it's more so just a trim of gold on the championship. The Intercontinental title we saw Jey Uso walk out with, it finally had that little bit extra added to it, which makes it look like a gorgeous championship. That is the blue accents into the globe on the center plate. I, like many others, think that that little bit of extra color would have made that title stand out. And apparently Triple H does indeed listen to the audience, because we saw Jey Uso walk out with that brand new IC title, and just like a lot of people have said for the past few years that that title's been around, that little bit of color gave it that much more dimension, and it makes it look even that much more beautiful than what I already think it did. I thought it was a great new design for the IC title to retire the previous inception of the classic look, and now that little hint of blue color in the center plate on the globes stands it out and makes it look absolutely awesome. Now, I digress. Back to NXT. I'm actually not mad about the results of Julia losing in her debut match on a big stage. Not a debut match, obviously, overall for WWE. We saw that against Chelsea Green. But her first big stage matchup, it was okay for her to lose. The more I thought about it, I think this was the right route to go, because much to the same of Ethan Page, you're not bringing somebody in to just get that one-off hotshot booking. No, you want to continue to build up the aura around your stars, and Julia definitely has it. And if reports are indicating that she's supposed to be the face of the NXT women's division going forward, then it's okay that she takes this loss, because you're going to build her back up, and when that moment comes that she actually captures the NXT women's title, it will mean that much more. Could this also mean she's going to have to deal with Cora Jade? I'm thinking so, but does that mean we're seeing a reunion between Cora Jade and Roxanne Perez? It certainly looks like it. That old saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Or could this be good friends, better enemies? However you want to go about it, it looks like the frenemy relationship between Perez and Jade is going to be a focal point now on NXT. I think that's awesome. Trick Williams defeating Ethan Page and becoming the NXT champion for the second time puts him in rarefied air, as he's one of only a few men to hold that NXT championship more than once, and he's still the biggest talent they got down there. I think it was a great move. Ethan Page was a great champion for the time that he needed to be, and Trick Williams is going to be a great representation for the NXT brand moving forward. Finally, we get to Friday Night SmackDown, and the main event is really the main point that was center stage in that episode of SmackDown. Granted, we saw prior to that ladder match a phenomenal women's match between Michin, Mia Yim, and Chelsea Green in that dumpster match. I gotta say, both women looked absolutely stellar. The spots they pulled off were amazing, especially that final powerbomb spot from Mia Yim to Chelsea Green, putting her in the dumpster and securing her win. Great showing for both those ladies. And I gotta say, Chelsea Green's character work is next level. That woman deserves every bit of praise that she gets. She herself has admitted that while she may not be the most athletically inclined in the ring, she doesn't view wrestling in that way. She has admitted that she would fit perfectly back in the Divas era, and I actually agree with her on that statement. She also has a great in-ring ability, though, for what she wants to do for her character. She fits it perfectly. If you want proof of that, go back and watch her. I believe she was known as the Black Widow in her Lucha Underground phase, and her match against Pentagon was absolutely stellar. You can also watch her previous work in Impact or TNA. However you want to view them. She had great matches there. She is just a stellar women's wrestler, and I'm glad that she is getting some notoriety, and her character work has been flawless. And Mia Yim is starting to get that train rolling on her momentum as well. I think big things are coming for her as well. But the main event, the three-way ladder match for the WWE Tag Team titles, was absolutely stellar as well. This is part of why I don't have an issue with them putting big matches on free TV sometimes, because you get moments like we had with the ladder match. Montez Ford clearing the ladder and hitting their blockbuster finish. While it may not have been the smoothest of landings, it still looked great. And then the Bloodline retaining the tag titles over their oppositions, DIY and the Street Profits. Bloodline continuing their dominance, and man, if they are not being solidified as a great Bloodline 2.0, I don't know what else you're wanting from them. They've got great heat. They've got great work going on. Jacob Fatu is firing on all cylinders. Even though they don't reference them as such, the GOD, even though Tonga Loa has had a little bit of hiccups here and there, they are doing their part very well. Solo Sikoa has become a great heel and the current tribal chief for the Bloodline. Great things are going on there. That led into a great main event match for Bad Blood and what they were aiming for in that, which we'll talk about momentarily. It was just a great week overall for in-ring wrestling. You know, I enjoy when I can come on here and say that as a fan, which I hope most people that listen to this or tune into this actually feel the same way, that when you have great in-ring wrestling taking place, it really helps your fandom grow that much more. And I can't help but be excited about wrestling as a whole, especially with the news that we got. And I don't want to talk about it just yet. I want to save that more for the end because of the implications that can come with it. And will it make them a success? We'll talk about that momentarily. But let's review the Bad Blood PLE from last night. Because, man, I sit here Sunday morning and I got to say, there have been 4 Bad Blood events. And there's been a Hell in the Cell match at all 4 of the Bad Blood PLEs. It's really, really hard to pick, honestly, what was the best of the 4. Now, I will say there's probably one of those you could deem as not as great quality, and I don't want to pull out any of those. I'll let you determine which one you think I might be mentioning. But man, 27 years to the day was the debut of the Hell in the Cell match with Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker. A lot of people will still say the first one is the best one. And I went back and rewatched it earlier this week, and I gotta say, it still holds up. It's a great Hell in the Cell match. It was a great way to really put a stamp on the rivalry between Michaels and Taker for the time being. Obviously, we know they would go back and do a casket match a few months later, but to go ahead and end that rivalry where it was at that time, it was the perfect way to do it. But Triple H and Shawn Michaels pulling out a Bad Blood Hell in the Cell in 2004 was absolutely stellar, and I went back and rewatched that one as well. I rewatched all of those Hell in the Cells along with the one we saw last night. Kevin Nash and Triple H did good at 03, but really, not going to lie, there's not much to really talk about in that one. It was kind of straightforward and was one of the least effective Hell in the Cell matches. Again, not saying it was bad, but it definitely left a lot more on the table of what they could have done. Was it a little violent? Sure. Did it have Mick Foley as the special referee? Yeah. But it wasn't necessarily something that I enjoyed going back and rewatching. Again, both guys did fine, but it's not one that I would go and revisit if I had an option. Now, Triple H and Shawn Michaels, as I was saying, that for a while was my favorite Hell in the Cell because it was a rivalry that I enjoyed since they started it in 2002. It had a lot of history behind it, and it, I believe to this day, is still the longest Hell in the Cell. I don't know if last night's beat that time. I don't think it did, but I'm sure it came somewhere relatively close. At 47 minutes between Michaels and Triple H, they pulled out all their stops as well with tables and ladders. Both men were bleeding. To me, much like the one with Nash and Triple H, I think when you use it to blow off a big rivalry, it really does require a lot of the story elements we saw last night. I've seen some people chastise WWE already for it because AEW gets so much chastisement for it, even though they don't do it as frequently anymore, which is why you don't see the complaint as often. But The use of blood in wrestling should be saved for when it fits the story, and last night's McIntyre Punk match did just that. To the same effect that Michaels and Triple H did, both men bled there, and last night Punk and McIntyre did the same thing in a very brutal finality match between the two of them. Their rivalry was capped off to perfection, in my opinion. It had great spots. A lot of spots made you even cringe at certain times. I mean, shoot, McIntyre going for the Claymore and hitting his lower back on the steel steps made me wince, and I can only imagine how that felt. The suplex from one side of the corner all the way through the table on the other side on the floor was an amazing spot as well. The chain wrapped around Punk's knee to hit the GTS and put Drew away at the end was spectacular. Also, the nods to the first Hell in the Cell were amazing from both guys. Drew coming out, not doing his traditional stand on the middle with the one foot on the top rope and doing his pose with the fire behind him. They actually changed it up a little bit and paid homage to the Undertaker's entrance from Hell in a Cell. Drew standing on the corner and doing a similar pose to that of the Dead Man for his pyro was awesome. And then Punk's nod to Shawn Michaels with the heart on his gear, the silver heart, and the overall silver and black colorway with his gear, a tribute to Shawn and the first Hell in the Cell as well. Great matchup overall. In my opinion, it is a 5-star Hell in the Cell match. It did everything it was supposed to do, and everything that Hell in the Cell is supposed to represent was on point there. The other matches on the card, for the most part, delivered very well. With the exception of a couple of spots, Bayley and Nia Jax had a decent matchup that almost saw Tiffany Stratton cash in. I think it's just a matter of time before we see that take place. Maybe last night should have been it, but I'm okay with them holding off for now. Damian Priest and Finn Balor pulled out a banger on their own, and man, I think Damian Priest has arrived as a big-time star. Balor, he'll be just fine. This, I think, is his rejuvenation as well as a solid heel. Not as like a goofy heel or character work like he's done previously in the Judgment Day. I think this might be where you can say safely he is the leader of the Judgment Day, even though storyline-wise they say there's not a leader. There's always a leader. And I think Finn is back in that position, that driver's position of being the face that leads that faction now. Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley did what they did, and it was a decent match with the shark cage stipulation as well. Raquel Rodriguez also returned, and unfortunately, while the spot didn't go as planned, they did the best they could to cover up their misfortunes and mishappenings, but overall, you can't really be too upset with it. It could have been better in some instances, but I don't think we're done with this rivalry yet, so I am open to seeing where this goes. Let's not put any kind of bad juju on it yet. Yes, mistakes happen. Mistakes were made last night. Things could have been better, but let's see where they go from here, because I don't think we're done just yet with the Liv Morgan, Rhea Ripley, Dominic Mysterio storyline. And then the main event, where I gotta say, I very much felt like that shouldn't have been the main event going into the Bad Blood PLE. I thought the Hell in a Cell should have been last, because at the previous PLEs for Bad Blood, all three were main evented by the Hell in a Cell. So I kind of wish they would have done that until I watched it. The main event delivered in every way that it needed it to. You had the two powerhouse guys, and I don't mean physical powerhouses, but Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns are two powerhouse characters. There is no debating they're the faces of WWE, and having their dueling entrances where Cody had the marching band, the local marching band, and then you had the local orchestra for Roman doing his entrance. It was a great play for both guys. Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu really shine through on the bloodline, especially Fatu being in his first big-time match with, honestly, the two biggest stars in the company, and Solo, who is positioned as the ultimate heel for the bloodline as the new tribal chief, turned out perfect. He is shining bright as a star in the WWE. Solo, again, showing how solid he is as a main event worker. The overall match came off amazingly. Cody Rhodes jumping from the corner down to Fatu through the announcer's table was a great spot, setting up Roman to put the finishing touches on Solo Sikoa, but not without a little help from a returning Jimmy Uso of all people. That, in and of itself, was a pretty fun surprise that WWE had in store. Some saw it coming, but I think some actually thought the return we did see coming back was going to take place probably during the match, but instead it was part of the post. The Rock, the final boss, showing up. What is he here for? He hasn't said a word. All we saw him do is come out, look at the ring, cock the eyebrow, and do a 1, 2, 3. And some wondered what was the point of this, especially when he does the little bow at the end. But something else that I think people need to keep in mind is he did this whole slicing of the neck motion. He did the same thing at WrestleMania before he delivered the people's elbow. And I think the 1, 2, 3 is in reference to Roman, Jimmy, Cody off with their heads. Interesting little tidbit there. But speaking of Cody as well, there was an interesting segment that was not on camera, but it was caught on a fan camera. Kevin Owens attacking Cody Rhodes as part of some confrontation that took place between the two. We don't know exactly what the issue is. I'm sure we'll find out this upcoming Friday on SmackDown, but I love this part. I've been saying that the feud between Owens and Rhodes was not over and that this could actually be a defining feud for Cody's title reign. This is proving me right now, as I think Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes are going to have a banging rivalry to continue, and with a heel Owens at that, this is going to be absolutely phenomenal for Kevin Owens. Speaking of phenomenal, it looked like AJ Styles was hurt on SmackDown as he made his return against Carmelo Hayes. We didn't talk about this earlier, but it looks like that's all just a work, thankfully, and Styles seems to be just fine, as they say it is part of the storyline narrative. Also, we saw a vignette on SmackDown and Bad Blood showing what looked to be a car starting and driving down the streets of a city that looked very familiar and was confirmed last night in the newest vignette, which showed Ford Field in the background. Yeah, it was the city of Detroit, and you had what looked to be a muscle car going through the streets. I think it's safe to say that that vignette is going to be for the debut of Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin, the Motor City Machine Guns. I cannot wait to see it happen. I have obviously been open about my appreciation and love for that tag team since its TNA days, and I cannot wait to see what they do on WWE SmackDown. I think it's going to be so much fun to watch these guys do what they do on a big stage. And man, there's just been so much that took place. We didn't even talk about the Gunter interaction last night. We saw the Crown Jewel stipulation added where you're going to have a champion versus champion take place for the Crown Jewel Championship. And I wasn't a huge fan of that stipulation nor of the title, honestly, because what does it matter who's the best of the best champion at this point? What's the implication for it? Is there some kind of reward for your champion succeeding for your brand? Like, is this going to be whoever wins gets the number 30 spot in the Royal Rumble that'll come up in February? Like, I want there to be a reason that they need to win besides a championship. To me, it just is no better than the greatest Royal Rumble Saudi championship we saw at the very first Saudi Arabia show, the greatest Royal Rumble. So maybe they'll explain more, whether that's prior or post. I really hope there's more to it than just a championship. But the big thing out of it was Goldberg interacting with Gunter, as Gunter retracted what he said about Goldberg being his favorite, and how could he be a favorite when he's just a one-trick pony for the current greatest wrestler in the world. Is a great little touch there. And could we see Goldberg versus Gunter in the very near future? It kind of looks like it. And Triple H, he even said on the press conference, never say never. Also, it's worth noting that as it stands, Goldberg's return and interaction has more views than The Rock's return at Bad Blood on YouTube currently. So maybe that's an implication of what's to come. Maybe that's a little bit more of spice added to this pot of gumbo. Who knows? I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to see what goes on for both companies, because also we heard over this past week, MVP confirmed that he signed with AEW. He brought in Shelton Benjamin this past week as part of the 5th anniversary of Dynamite, and it has been confirmed by Fightful that Bobby Lashley has also signed with AEW, and I think we can safely say they are going to reform the Hurt business under the Hurt Syndicate, and it looks like they'll add Mercedes Moné to that same faction, which honestly is pretty intriguing. I don't think Monet really needs the faction, but I think it's just going to up her stock. And who knows? Could they convince Swerve? I doubt they will. I think he's going to be their first target, but only time will tell where they go with that story. It should be a fun ride there. MVP has always been great on the mic. And as the mouthpiece for the newly Hurt Syndicate, I think he is going to go above and beyond anything he has done already. He's been a proven commodity before. Can't wait to see what he pulls out next. But before we go, let's talk about the big news. AEW, would they survive? Would they get a TV deal? We had the question, I should say, answered this past week, as indeed WBD has put pen to paper. They have re-signed AEW to what is being reported as a 4-year deal, 3 years guaranteed with a 1-year option, and the original number was $150 million per year, but apparently that has actually been increased. It is really $185 million per year. That's a great success for AEW. Being only a 5-year-old company and to get the deal that they did is absolutely amazing. Congrats to everybody there. That is looking at renewing for Dynamite and Collision, still airing on TBS and TNT respectfully. And the big news that comes out of that as well is both shows are to be simulcasted on the Max streaming platform starting in January of 2025. And that's huge, huge news for Max subscribers. That also is going to bring the AEW library and hopefully the Ring of Honor library as well to the Max streaming service, as will the pay-per-views at a discounted rate. What exactly does that mean, discounted? I don't know. Personally, I wish they would have kind of gone with the Peacock formula of the WWE PLEs, but it looks like they're going to go more of an ESPN Plus route with the UFC, where they charge for a pay-per-view, and maybe it'll be worth it for them to do so, because a lot of people have thought that that model should have been what WWE did with Peacock. I think, honestly, the way that they've gone about it has been much more successful for them, and only time will tell if charging for a pay-per-view on the streaming service for Max and AEW is going to be beneficial for them. Only time is going to tell, but it's an exciting time. January 2025 is shaping up to be something amazing. AEW hitting the Max streaming service, Raw moving over to Netflix, and then outside the US, that's where the WWE Network is going to be hosted, is on Netflix, with the Bad Blood PLE being one of the first that's showcased as a PLE on Netflix overseas. I saw a photo of that shared earlier this week. Great things are happening in the world of pro wrestling, and I'm here for every bit of this ride. So, I'm throwing it back to you guys. What did you enjoy this past week in professional wrestling? Did you like Raw, NXT, AEW, SmackDown shows? What do you think of the Bad Blood PLE? Do you think Goldberg has one more match left in him? Did you enjoy the Hell in the Cell match between Punk and McIntyre? And what is going to happen with The Rock? What's going to happen with Cody? What's going to happen with Roman? So many questions I could ask all of you. Why don't y'all just sound off in the comments down below of what you're looking forward to or what you think may be happening. Make sure you have hit that subscribe button and are official to the YouTube channel. Also follow us on all of our social media platforms, Facebook under the Four Corner Podcast banner, and X, Instagram, and TikTok. We are doing great numbers on our platform, so please continue to show support. I will be back next week to talk more professional wrestling as always. Until then, y'all have a great week. Enjoy Monday Night Raw tonight, along with NXT, AEW, and SmackDown later this week. Guys, simply continue to love pro wrestling.